there, welcome to Prairie Point's Quilt Shop in Ponoka, Alberta. Today we are very pleased to present Devin and Sharon, the Prairie Quilt Mercantile girls, who happen to be in the shop to do a book signing on their Fresh from the Prairies book.
Hi folks, we're here at Prairie Point's quilt shop in Ponoka, and we thank Lynn for having us to her lovely little shop. It's a pleasure to be here. We're doing a book signing for our new book, Fresh from the Prairies. There it is. Ta-da! Finally came. 2 years in the making for us, and we're thrilled with it. And we thought we would just do a little mini trunk show. This is kind of what we usually do. We do a little teaching on our methods and our theory behind how we quilt and what we do. My name's Devin Levine and Sharon Smith, and we'll just take her away.
So it'll be kind of a mini version because we don't have all of our quilts right in front of us, but this quilt right here that's on the table before us is usually kind of a starting point for us. When Devin and I began writing patterns together a few years back, we realized that there were a few fundamental principles that went into all of the designs that we created. Yeah. And it was this pattern that we were writing that we were able to really identify what exactly they were and what they meant and how to put them into words to help others embrace those philosophies, basically. Yeah. So this quilt is called Miss Elizabeth. It's not in our new book, but it is an individual pattern that we have. And the very first thing that we always teach everyone, the first element that goes into all of our quilts, is the variety aspect. This quilt in particular has 263 different fabrics.
That's a lot of fabric.
There's a lot of different fabrics. There's about 3,600. There is 3,600 1-inch squares in this quilt, but 263 different prints used. And so the variety aspect is always the number one. Always the first point that we start with. When we talk about variety in this kind of aspect, there's all different colors of the rainbow in it, but there's also variety within color-controlled scrappy quilts, which I'm wondering, this quilt right over here, that I don't know if you can pan over to the pink and brown quilt that's right there. That's one example, because the variety, yes, there is a theme with the colors, with the pinks and browns and creams, but there's
a lot of them.
There's variety within those. So there's several different pinks, several browns, several creams. And then behind us over here, with the blues and browns and creams, it's the same idea. So and then as well over here beside us, the purples and browns and creams and some blacks. So the variety aspect is not just in using lots of different prints, but it can be also applied to what we call as the color controlled scrappy. So if you're breaking out of the whole, I can't use more than 3 or 5 fabrics in one quilt because I don't know how to put them all together, you can start by taking the total yardage for brown and divide that into fat quarters or fat eighths, or right down to individual patches.
Yeah. So instead of having one brown, you could divide it into 4 browns or 8 browns, and that still lets you stay in your brown safety zone. But like Sharon said, it lets you kind of control the chaos.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you have that, and if you really like using a lot of little bits and anything goes, then absolutely this is the.
Why don't you tell them what you started doing with this at the very beginning?
Yes, the inspiration for this quilt was a postage stamp quilt, and if you haven't heard of how a postage stamp quilt is designed, it isn't designed. It's just a big mess of 1-inch squares. So none of it is matching like this, where there's 2 alternating fabrics in a section. It's a complete sea of 1-inch squares. It just looks like a litter of scraps on the floor, basically.
It's a lot to look at.
It's a lot to look at, and it's hard to look at because when you view it, there's nothing to focus on. It's like one of those pixelated pictures where you have to stand back and kind of unfocus your eyes to be able to see something emerge, but nothing usually emerges from them. They're just way too busy to look at. So yes, they're high variety, but there's not a lot of rest in the quilt, which is one of the elements that we'll talk about last. So wanted to make the postage stamp idea, but needed to infuse the other elements of our design to make it something that you could appreciate looking at. So yes, the variety is there, but if you'll notice, there are different sections of the same two fabrics that are being repeated throughout the quilt. And so that gives you something a little bit to stop and focus on instead of, I don't know where to look next. I think my phone dinged. Text. So the variety is the very first and probably one of the most important. I would say that we talk about it first because I think it's the most important aspect.
So then the next aspect, and all three of these aspects are in the introduction of our book, by the way. We kind of really go into detail on them. But the next one is value. So to me, that feels kind of like my baby. I love the value aspect of what we do. Value is basically the difference between light and dark. It's relative. It's not an absolute thing. It's a relative thing. So this quilt is a great example, because you've got you've got great value in each block. Sometimes we have a muddier value, so I'm not sure if you can kind of see this, but you've got a darker light, and then sometimes you have a bright light, and that just shows you the difference of value here. And it's really, really, really important. It makes your quilt gorgeous to mix up the value. Maybe at another time you could, just show another quilt back there that we have behind our photographer, and it's a real value impact because it's high value. It's not a muddy value at all. But the nice thing about a quilt like this is it shows such a variety of value in all the aspects here. And sometimes you could have a piece that might look light compared to what it's beside, but you could put this with, let's say, this piece here, and this would be your dark.
You could even put those two lights together. Lean over. Yeah. This is the light here. You could even put those two as a contrast
together. It's your light and dark.
Even though that darker of those two lights is actually still very, very light. So a section like this where you've got the lights and darks, and then this one here, which the light is so much darker than the other lights, this one's kind of a mid-range, adds so much more interest to the overall look than if the whole quilt was just like this patch here, where light they're value. Pretty much the same light to dark values. So when you have a pattern that calls for lights, mediums, and darks, or lights, mediums, medium darks, and darks, you'll take those three middle, the light, medium light, mediums, and medium darks, and switch the positions of them every once in a while in your pattern, so that this is the kind of speckled or shadowed effect that you'll get.
You even get that here in the sashings. You can even see in the sashings. They are all, neutral sashings, but some of them are darker value and some are light
than others.
That really adds interest.
Yeah. Making quilts like this is, they're interesting to look at now when they're done, but they really hold your interest so much more when you're making them, because every section turns out differently depending on what you're putting with what.
And they're a pleasure to look at always. For other people too, for generations, it's more interesting.
This quilt has 100 6-inch little checkerboard patches, and I'd have to shoot myself if I had to make every single one of them exactly the same way. So making one patch and going, oh, I love it, and really it's just 10 minutes to make one of these. How different they all turn out, it just really makes the whole process more enjoyable. So not only when you get to enjoy it when the quilt is finished, but you actually get to enjoy your hobby while you're making them.
It's nice.
Yeah.
We are on to the third element that goes into all of our quilting, and that is what we call rest. It took us a while to come up with the whole title and the name of that. We knew what the element was, we could describe it to each other, and we put it in everything we did, but when it came to writing the book, we were really stumped. We couldn't figure out what to call it. And we kind of describe it as a calm in the storm of kind of a chaos of color. Rest is it started out really as what we called a neutral element in our quilting, but it's even expanded more than that now. But it's the thing that allows you, it's the soft resting spot for the eye that allows you to put a lot of color or a lot of a busy design without overwhelming the project. So if, for instance, in this quilt, rest is these lovely neutral sashings between, and it's what allows your eye to rest between these really busy blocks in the center here. It's also in this lovely border here, and it's just this soft neutral. So we describe it as, it can be anything kind of that exists in nature. So so from the lightest white, which we don't always, but we like to pop in some white, bright white into our quilts, and you can go all the way from black, all the way to black. That can be, anything that kind of exists in nature and lets your eye take a rest from the busy. It can also be a common element in a quilt. So, for instance, even in this quilt, it can even just be the patches everywhere, so that it's something that is the same everywhere. I don't mean the patches are the same, but the concept of the patches are the same.
And the two fabrics appear; they're consistent.
Yeah.
There's the two same fabrics in each set of patches, so that's something that's not overwhelming to look at.
Yeah.
If you were to visualize this quilt with different lights and different darks throughout the whole thing,
It would be busier.
It would still look great, but it would be much busier.
And
so,
there is one patch like that in here.
yes, there is, and I think it's down there at the front edge. And we like to throw different things in. There's a patch down there that has, I don't know, 8 or 10 different fabrics in it. And, a patch like that is really interesting to look at, because, in the old days when women ran out of fabric, they didn't go to the store and buy more. They rummaged through their bins to see what they could find to make up the difference, and out of necessity. So that's when you see those cute, quirky little things that give your quilts that character that the old ones do.
And if you have enough rest in your quilt, you can get away with doing that kind of thing in a quilt.
Yeah, you do. So the whole inspiration for Postage Stamp, with that riot of and the chaotic plan with all of those 1-inch squares, then has now become something that's really enjoyable to look at, because you have the variety element still, but you have the rest in it and the consistency of the two fabrics in each patch, with these large sashings, and then the value that gives it even more interest by mixing up the positions of the value in there. So those 3 elements really are personified in this quilt.
And we say 3 elements, but we actually have a 4th element that we like to pop in.
We do, but it's not technical. It's not a technical element. It's love, and we like to use our quilts. Devin has a great explanation of how quilts used to be used for a practical purpose, and to nurse sick people, or have warm babies, or make babies on blankets, and that kind of thing. And we use them in our everyday lives. Yes, they're on our walls for decoration, but we also, when this quilt is not at a show or coming along on a trunk show with us, it's on my bed. Yeah. So this is the 4th element. This is a little bit of love on this quilt, and it's red wine has been spilt on this quilt. And what happened was, I had filled up a nice big glass, and it was the last of the bottle in the house, and I filled my glass right to the brim, because I'm a glutton, and went and sat down on the couch with this quilt, and my daughter had come running over to give me a hug, and she knocked over the glass of wine on the
white carpet.
On the white carpet, and the quilt was draped over the couch and onto the floor, so it got in the way. And I was upset. I thought, what am I going to do? I'm going to get this out. And I had all kinds of advice as to what to use and how to try to get the stain out. And one lady said to me, you leave it, Sharon. That's going to be there. Your daughter's always going to remember. I did that. I spilled that wine on my mom's quilt. And I'll always remember the hug that she came running over to give me. So it's something that is sentimental, that attaches you to your quilts. And so if you don't use them, you won't spill wine on them, but you also won't have those endearing
memories.
Elements. Yeah, those memories.
Our book, too, is going to be all on the love theme, so that's just a little teaser.
Yes, we had we did a mystery quilt and medicine hat with a group of ladies, and we told them it was going to be all about love, and one lady said that she thought the title should be Under the Quilt. So that's our working title.
We'll see if the publisher goes for it.
Yeah, they might not. So those are the 3 elements that we use. They're consistency throughout all of the quilts in our book, and all the ones that, even the individual patterns that we come up with. And they seem to be a good explanation of how to create the look that people, they look at our quilts and they're captivated by them, but they're just not sure why. And they're not sure how to go home and recreate those those kinds of quilts, and they just get lost. So this is the ABCs of it, basically.
So pick up our book, and
Yes.
and you'll see all about it in there.